did we get here? How did Moses get to this moment in the 3rd chapter of Exodus? Because right now, in this passage, Moses is labeled as a marked man, a fugitive from the law, after killing an Egyptian soldier who was beating an Israelite slave. Moses has gone from living in Pharaoh's palace in the lap of luxury and prominence to a simple wandering shepherd herding his father-in-law's flock. Now, this is the backdrop when Moses first recognizes the burning bush and enters into the presence of God. And that's where I want to stay for a few moments before we come to the table. Because the burning bush is about God's holiness, God's majesty, God's presence. So what might this burning bush, this 3rd chapter in Exodus, say to us today about God's holiness? A few thoughts I'd like to throw up to you. And the first is this. Have you ever noticed that God usually appears in the ordinary? Think about that. God usually appears in the ordinary, which serves as an awe-inspiring caution. John's gospel begins with these words, "The Word became flesh and dwelt among us." Is there anything more ordinary than your flesh? I live in mine 24/7. And so do you. Anything more ordinary in that moment than Moses leading his sheep through the wilderness? In my study this week, I came across these words from Edmund Burke, an 18th century political philosopher, who turns a marvelous phrase into a wonderful truth. He says this: "History is full of momentous trifles." Let me repeat that. History is made and full of momentous trifles. That stuck with me this week. Because if we look deeply, many times our routine events can become astonishing. The very essence of creation is how God takes our ordinary and shapes the extraordinary right before our eyes if they're open. Because God's holiness is not dependent on place or time. Take, for example, the birth of Jesus. It was not Joseph. It was not Mary. It was not the shepherds. It was not the manger. It was not the angel or the wise men that made the nativity holy. Only one thing made it holy: the very presence of God. There was no holy shrine or tabernacle or temple, only a feeding trough where God was present and made known. It's not the huge Holy Bible that makes this place holy. It's not the candles. It's not even the cross that makes this time and place holy. It is only one thing that makes it holy, and that's the presence of God. As we live out this holiness, God enters into our time of God's timeless time and transcends our time in His presence. God appears in the ordinary, in the everyday, the mundane. But secondly, I began to think about that and begin to realize that God is also, while in the ordinary, is only made known in the silence. Says the guy who's in front of you talking. God is only made known in the silence. In order to hear God speak, we must be silent. I don't know who wrote these words, but they were pretty profound, and I wanted to share them with you. You can't plan spiritual discovery. You can't even plan scientific discovery. We're told hundreds of times, if not thousands of times, Thomas Edison woke up planning to harness electricity and failed. The life lesson, friends, is that we cannot plan discovery. I don't wake up in the morning and go, oh, I think I'll discover fill in the blank. That's not how it works. The only thing that we can do is put ourselves in a position that leads to discovery. Every time we are silent, we put ourselves in the position to discover and rediscover God. Now, with that said, I am keenly aware of the fact that most of us do not have the luxury of too much downtime, too much silent time. That most of us, in the hectic pace in which we live, try to just carve out moments of that silence. But that does not diminish the need to be silent or the fact that we must be silent in order to hear God speak. But the silence I speak of is not the silence of withdrawal. It's not going and living as a monk somewhere up on a mountaintop. What I'm speaking about when I refer to silence is centeredness. Chew on that one for a while. A centeredness. It doesn't mean we're not involved. No, we're very involved. It means that when we are involved in life, in the ordinary, when everything wants a piece of you, there is something coming from all directions. Silence in the moment means that our hearts can still be quiet. Our spirit can still be calm and at peace, so that we might hear God speak. God's presence is most known in the ordinary if we are centered enough, silent enough, amidst the mayhem, to listen. But God does so finely, so that when His presence is made known to us, that God can demand something from us. Here's how I think it works. At least according to Moses in Exodus 3. First, our name is called when we are silent. In this passage, God calls Moses twice. And when someone speaks your name, isn't that cool? Isn't that special? When your name is called, it's important, it's worthy, it's significant. I know. Because my mom used to call my name a lot. All three of them. And it usually was followed by, wait till your dad gets home. And here we are. God calling us by name this morning as He did to Moses 1,200 years before the birth of Jesus. And by calling us by name, God commands our attention and gives an invitation of sorts that demands a response. Now, scholars have referenced many reasons for God requesting Moses to take off his sandals. Some say it was that Moses' feet were unclean and should not trample on the holy. Some say it was an act of reverence, likened to Joshua in the 5th chapter, as Joshua marches around Jericho the commander of the Lord's army tells him to take off his shoes, for the place you stand now is holy. And I believe all of those explanations are spot on. But I also believe this was an invitation for Moses to make contact with the holy, with no interference, no protection, no barrier or obstacle. It is human, frail flesh connecting in that moment with the divine. I read that and I said, well, that's nice. But my hunch is that in some way, you and I often shy away from a total and complete connection with the holy. Think about that. I think we're real good at shying away from that connection. And Wilbert Reese speaks of our unwillingness to totally embrace the holy. And he says this. I hope it's a gift. I would like to buy $3 worth of God, please. Oh, not enough to explode my soul or disturb my sleep. Just enough to equal a cup of warm milk or a snooze in the sunshine. I don't want enough of God to make me love someone I don't understand or pick beets with a migrant. No, I want excitement, not transformation. I want the warmth of the womb, not new birth. I want a pound of eternal in a paper sack. So may I please have $3 worth of God? I end this. Holiness is God's presence. If you get anything out of this, understand that holiness is God's presence, often made known to us in the ordinary. Holiness is God's presence experienced in our connected silence. And holiness is God's presence lived out in an all-encompassing invitation to connect with God, mind, body, and soul. Holiness is God's presence as we break the bread and share the cup. Let's prepare to do so as our choir prepares us to come to the table.